Assalamu alaikum, this is Zulf Shah. You're listening to the Remap Your Mind podcast, where I will be talking about mindsets, relationships, religion, culture, and spiritual afflictions. In today's episode, I'll explain how the complex realm of psychological warfare works when Iblis operates within the human psyche, using his soldiers to create feelings such as anger, sadness, anxiety, guilt, or hopelessness. And these aren't your regular feelings or emotions. They are magnified to a point where they appear out of proportion and often difficult to control. And those people who have experienced this firsthand will have a deeper understanding of how this type of psychological infiltration works. And this struggle is challenging, not only for the person who is experiencing this, but also for those offering supports, whether it's within the family unit or the wider community. And the difficulty is further compounded because it's a battle most people aren't familiar with, because people will rarely discuss what they are feeling at a personal level. It's not like it's a part of any school curriculum, higher education programs, or mainstream psychology textbooks. And so the lack of awareness and formal education surrounding these issues makes them even harder to comprehend, leaving individuals and their support systems feeling unequipped to navigate the complexities involved. And so as a result, for the person who's afflicted, navigating this experience can often feel isolating and misunderstood, making it all the more important to shed light on these hidden struggles. When Allah says, indeed, Shaitan is an enemy to you, so take him as an enemy, for many people, this concept can feel abstract. As humans, we often rely on what we can see and measure to understand the world around us. We may have read this warning in the Quran or heard it referenced many times in a lecture, yet we might not fully grasp the depth of its meaning or how this invisible enemy infiltrates our lives on a deeply personal level. And so when Allah says Shaitan is an enemy to you, this isn't merely a metaphor. It's a direct warning urging us not only to acknowledge Shaitan's existence, but also to actively defend ourselves from this intentional, unseen entity with one goal. I say unseen even though he is able to take many forms, which I'm not going to go into the details of now, but his ultimate goal is to lead us astray and disrupt our connection with our Creator, whether that's through whispers that cloud our judgment, manipulations that fuel conflicts within families, or temptations that erode our spiritual integrity. His methods are subtle yet destructive, and ignoring this enemy or underestimating his influence makes us vulnerable to his schemes and plans against humanity. And by now we would have understood, with all that we are witnessing around the world, the continuous wars and atrocities, the genocide we are currently witnessing in Gaza, no doubt these are all the hallmarks of Satan. Iblis thrives in environments of chaos and disorder, not only at a global scale, but even within our homes. His soldiers work tirelessly creating chaos, confusion, and amplifying division between husband and wife, brother and sister, children against their parents, in every combination imaginable through subtle manipulation. If it doesn't work top down, causing separation between husband and wife, it will work bottom up, using the children to create further disputes and disorder. The goal is to create maximum disruption among families and individuals, spreading division and disunity. And since we're all children of Adam, that makes us all targets, as that was the promise Iblis made to disseminate the children of Adam, peace be upon him. And one of the key tactics in Iblis's psychological warfare is making humans believe that the whispers and alternative thoughts in their minds are their own. In some extreme cases, this can lead to an identity crisis, especially when someone is afflicted from a very early age. This is also how the body begins to deteriorate, fueled by negative emotions like anger, self-doubt, resentment, despair, and depression. And we may not even realize this since we experience so many different emotions every day, but our thoughts and emotions actually feed the subconscious. And the shayateen are very well aware of how this works and how it's deeply connected to the biological systems that regulate our physical health. And so once they've influenced your thinking in this way, going undetected, your daily perspectives, shaped mostly by your subconscious patterns and beliefs, will begin to shape key aspects of your life. And this will affect your eating habits, alter how your body processes and digests food, and gradually affect your overall lifestyle. And over time, this influence extends into areas you might never consciously consider, which most people don't, such as your glandular and immune systems and the function of every cell in your body. What might initially seem like a subtle shift in your thought patterns can lead to a broader impact on your overall physical health and well-being. And it's usually after a ruqya session that it dawns on the individual that all this time, these ideas and voices leading them to commit sinful acts, question their morality, or even fall into despair were never truly their own. Now, as adults, we can often tell when something feels off. And if sorcery had been cast around a major life event, like marriage, for example, we would likely sense that something is wrong and seek help from a raqi. But what if a child is afflicted from a very young age? A child cannot easily distinguish between their own identity and the influence of a jinn, often accepting it as, this is just who I am. Now, in such cases, ruqya may not be an option, or even if it were, a child's limited comprehension and an undeveloped frontal lobe mean they cannot fully grasp what is happening to them. So in a situation like that, when a child is affected, as much as it may be distressing for the parents having to witness this, the parents' awareness of ruqya and understanding of the psychological impact becomes imperative, as the entire support system, primarily the family, will also be impacted. Although it's possible that the family could be affected as well, let's focus on the child to illustrate the intensity of this situation and its effects on family dynamics, both mentally and emotionally. By the time the child reaches adulthood, they may finally receive ruqya and begin to understand their experiences, yet they would have spent years absorbing influences that shape their identity, often entwined with a jinn's personality, leaving one to wonder what part of this personality truly belongs to the child. The family too may begin to question their understanding of reality. Every belief they once held may come under scrutiny, opening a new perspective on an alternative reality entwined with their own. This is where ruqya is often paired with therapy to reframe the individual's perceptions and establish a healthier foundation, almost like rewiring the mind. It's not a straightforward journey. Healing requires time, dedication, and patience. There's much to unlearn and relearn, but alhamdulillah, we have a program that works. We also have the Quran and Sunnah as our guide, and we've seen many people transform and discover a renewed sense of self over time. Now, I'd like to share an example of how this unfolds seen through the eyes of a young child afflicted from an early age. With no understanding of what is truly happening, the child assumes it must be medical, as her earliest memories are of her parents taking her in and out of hospitals. I have some notes that will provide insight into how this type of mind infiltration creates inner chaos, leaving individuals confused and disconnected from their spiritual foundation. Before I begin, I want to thank the sister for courageously sharing her notes, sharing personal information, especially at a trauma-based mind control level that in itself requires immense strength. I know how challenging this was for her as my patient. Together, we worked through numerous ruqya sessions and regular coaching to help reframe her experiences and establish a new default mindset. And it's her wish that this information be shared for the benefit of others. Her signs of affliction appeared as early as 3, though at the time the family assumed it was a medical issue, as most people do. During this time, she was continuously going in and out of hospitals until she became our patient at 20, which is when we discovered the underlying cause was ruqya related. Our findings reveal targeted efforts to cause maximum harm by inflicting significant internal damage that was aimed at gradually shutting her body down while appearing medical in nature on her records. We also discovered barriers were placed in her path to marriage, adding to the immense psychological burden she struggled with. Now at 24 years old and holding a degree in pharmaceuticals, her journey of resilience and growth continues. The impact on her mind was so severe that without her spiritual resilience, it could have led her to suicidal thoughts, which I believe she was already receiving subtle suggestions in that direction, but it was a strong connection to Allah and her awareness of the Islamic teachings on the sanctity of life that kept her grounded, protecting her from despair. And this case is a powerful reminder of how essential spiritual strength and a deep connection to your Creator are in facing trials and tribulations. And it was through patience and perseverance that we witnessed miracle after miracle and a remarkable progress from where we began to where we are now. Her journey exemplifies how spiritual endurance can lead to victory, even in the most challenging of circumstances. So where did this all start? Born in 2000, she traveled with her parents to their native country the following year for a holiday. In 2002, her mother noticed significant swelling in her eyes. After medical tests, she was diagnosed with nephrotic syndrome, which is a condition that causes the kidneys to leak large amounts of protein into the urine. So she was prescribed steroids along with other medications. During her early childhood, there were multiple visits to her native country where it's suspected that the sihr may have originated. During this time, she experienced frequent trips to the doctors and hospitals. Much of what she experienced during her early years left her unable to speak at school until year 6. In the UK, that would be around the age of 10 or 11. This silence, however, was not just a lack of words, but a manifestation of deeper struggles and the continuous visits to doctors and hospitals, further compounding her feelings of vulnerability. She endured repeated tests and medical procedures, all while grappling with the persistent belief that something was not right. However, she couldn't fully understand or articulate what that something was. This uncertainty, combined with the physical and emotional toll of her circumstances, created an overwhelming sense of fear, nervousness, and a lack of confidence, challenges that have lingered into recent years. Her first Ruqya session with me was in 2020, following a final attempt with a private treatment at a biolab medical unit in Harley Street, London. After running numerous tests, the doctor remarked that he had never seen this combination of allergies and sensitivities before, saying there's no cure, only management by avoiding triggers. Following that, during her Ruqya session with me, she experienced a strong reaction, making it clear that the root cause had been Ruqya related all along. What initially appeared to be purely medical was in fact primarily spiritual in origin, with shayateen from among the jinn causing internal damage in a way that went undetected in medical assessments. In a most recent referral due to a relapse, biopsies and tests raised concerns about a possible cancer diagnosis. But alhamdulillah, thankfully after urgent testing and continuous ruqya, the results came back negative. So let's take a closer look at some of the medical symptoms she experienced over the years, many of which are frequently observed in other ruqya patients, especially women. Gradual symptoms of tiredness and weakness began to appear, yet there were no signs of heavy periods or gastrointestinal issues to account for her unexplained anemia. Despite maintaining a good diet, she exhibited a noticeable iron deficiency, another common finding in ruqya patients. She was advised to be referred to hematology, but the referral was rejected by the hematology consultant, who instead requested further information suggesting that she might be losing blood from an unidentified source. However, there was no evidence to support this. She continued to feel persistently unwell, experiencing fainting spells, fatigue, chest pain, and shortness of breath, with no apparent triggers for these symptoms. A couple of units of blood transfusion were also administered. She was later referred to gastroenterology, where biopsy results confirmed celiac disease and post-infectious IBS. She also experienced bloating and indigestion. Bowen's disease was also identified, a type of skin cancer for which she underwent narrowband UVB light spectrum treatment. And in addition to that, irregular periods further complicated her condition. After a decade of medical issues, consultants finally provided a diagnosis, though it was incorrect. Imagine 10 years later and they still don't know the true cause of her condition. The medications and creams prescribed for symptomatic relief over the years may have caused more harm than the condition itself, since medical science lacks understanding or recognition of the possibility that a jinn could be causing this, meaning there is no knowledge of how the human body as a host might react to these treatments with another entity present. Ideally, one would need to separate the jinn from the human, run individual tests to observe the jinn's responses, and determine how this would affect the host's treatment, though this is not something anyone is physically capable of doing. However, research has shown that in addition to the recitation of the Quran over the patient, certain natural ingredients, many of which are found in Sunnah remedies, can serve as effective deterrents and aid in healing. In fact, many people have successfully healed and recovered using this method in combination with therapy. And when I say therapy, I'm not referring to conventional psychology, as it falls short in this area and fails to consider the impact jinn can have on the human mind and potentially be the root cause of certain illnesses and diseases. Her family medical history also revealed that her mother has hypothyroidism, a condition that is often linked to ruqya patients, and I'll elaborate on how this connects to her mother and the broader context a little later. So it became a continuous cycle of reliance on pharmaceuticals, which involved frequent visits to the doctors, surgeries, and hospitals over the years. This often resulted in being prescribed different medications to manage specific symptoms. Now, while chemical-based medications can provide relief and help manage symptoms, they often come with side effects that can disrupt the body's pH and chemical balance, potentially creating altered states that may provide an ideal environment for shayateen to thrive and for other issues to develop, especially when it comes to psychotropic drugs. And this highlights the importance of addressing the root causes of illness holistically and also understanding the broader impact these medications have on overall health rather than solely relying on symptom management. And most people like her who go through the medical system are returned to their usual environment and continue with further tests. However, what we're overlooking in this particular case are the deeper issues that began affecting her from a very early age. So far, as is often the case, we initially approached this as a purely medical issue, which tends to be our first assumption. However, the deeper causes of the condition were rooted in sihr and the accumulation of negative thoughts and emotions. It was a classic example of cause and effect compounding over the years. Her mental conditioning began at an early age, subtly shaping her perceptions and causing her to unconsciously accept the manipulations as a normal part of life. And over time, with repeated exposure, she internalized the belief that this is just who I am. And this highlights the insidious nature of psychological warfare and how the shayateen, by planting whispers and intrusive thoughts, which through repeated emotional reinforcement, begin to shape a person's core beliefs. These subtle yet persistent suggestions become so deeply embedded, blurring the lines between external influence and personal thought. Over time, these manipulations become so ingrained that individuals mistake them as their own authentic feelings and ideas, creating a distorted sense of self and an altered perception of reality. And this is how the cycle perpetuates. Thoughts that were never truly their own lead to behaviors and beliefs that feel very personal. Breaking free from this requires more than just awareness. It requires intentional effort to uncover and address the deep-rooted causes of this psychological and spiritual entrapment. So let's explore how this affected her on a psychological level, influencing her emotional and mental well-being in ways that extended far beyond the physical symptoms. And by examining the deeper impact, we can better understand the toll such experiences take on an individual's inner world, shaping their thoughts, emotions, and overall mental state. Many people may relate to these experiences, yet not everyone feels comfortable reaching out for help. And that's understandable. Some people just don't know who to turn to, fearing judgment and rejection. Others may hesitate because they may be worried about being misunderstood, labeled as mentally unwell, or dismissed as just simply imagining things, which is a horrible way of invalidating their very real struggles. And the stigma surrounding unconventional symptoms, especially those that intertwine spiritual, psychological, and physical aspects, often leaves individuals feeling isolated and unwilling to share experiences they fear are too complex or taboo to discuss. And this leads to an overwhelming sense of isolation, reinforcing a belief that they are alone in their pain or that no one would take them seriously. And over time, this self-imposed silence only intensifies the psychological burden, creating a cycle in which fear, shame, and doubt stops them from seeking the support they desperately need. And it could be that for some, this hesitation comes from a lack of trust in the medical or spiritual systems, especially if they've faced dismissive or invalidating responses in the past. More so in the medical system, I believe, where mentioning spiritual afflictions could potentially land you a referral for a mental health assessment. So let's take a closer look at how these intrusive voices actually sound like and what's happening in the person's mind. While you may not have experienced this personally yourself, you might know someone who has, and they've shared similar experiences with you. These voices are persistent and manipulative, and they will vary from person to person, their situation, the type of jinn, and a whole lot of other variables. But the voice will often be sounding like your own thoughts, but with a destructive tone. So for instance, you might hear abusive statements like, nobody cares about you, you're ugly, you're worthless, you're stupid. And like that, they will pick apart your confidence layer by layer. If you're trying to make progress, for example, let's say through journaling or self-reflection, these voices may shift to, this is pointless, you're wasting your time, everyone will think you're crazy, what if someone reads what you've written, what will they think of you? In some extreme cases, you may get intrusive thoughts urging you to self-harm, harm your children or others, or other violent impulses. There have also been cases where the shayateen may use sleep deprivation as a form of psychological torture, sometimes lasting for years, which only intensifies the distress, as was the case with several of my patients. And years of psychological manipulation and abuse like this can cause your body and nervous system to feel a constant heightened sense of threat, even when there's no apparent danger. In conventional psychology, an identity crisis or any of what I've mentioned so far can have multiple psychological explanations depending on the context and underlying causes. It could point to complex PTSD, where a person has experienced prolonged or repeated trauma such as childhood abuse or neglect, emotional or psychological manipulation, and even chronic exposure to unstable or unsafe environments can cause complex PTSD, as it can disrupt a person's sense of self, leading to feelings of worthlessness, guilt and shame, or fragmented identity. This is especially common in individuals who have had their autonomy or sense of control stripped away during their early years. And in extreme cases, an intense identity crisis could be confused with dissociative disorder, as it involves significant disruptions in a person's sense of self due to trauma, often linked to severe childhood abuse. It could also be mistaken for borderline personality disorder, as it often involves instability in self-image, your goals or values. People with borderline personality disorder may even experience an intense identity crisis, feeling as though they don't know who they are, or shifting between different personas depending on their environment or relationships. Now, if we consider spiritual explanations such as shayateen manipulations, an identity crisis could result from the intrusion of external influences on the mind, meaning possession in contexts of ruqya or spiritual warfare. Now, having said that, there may not have been any actual abuse involved. Instead, you were made to believe where a normal response was exaggerated or distorted, especially if there is shayateen involvement, leading you to perceive it as a form of abuse. And it's often through ruqya that you truly understand the source of those feelings, that an entity was responsible for this psychological manipulation that twisted your perception of what others may have considered as normal responses. Now, I want to make it clear that this type of manipulation and abuse should not be confused with actual physical abuse from a parent or carer. While both can have serious emotional impacts, psychological manipulation, especially by external entities, works in subtle and insidious ways, often causing internal conflict, self-doubt, and confusion that may appear as medical. In contrast, physical abuse is not only direct harm that may leave visible, tangible marks, but it's often accompanied by psychological abuse. In fact, the impact of physical abuse is both physical and psychological, as it can deeply affect a person's emotional and mental well-being. The scars may not be visible on the body, but the emotional and psychological trauma can be just as damaging, if not more so, as it shapes a person's sense of self-worth, safety, and trust. It's possible that the parent may also be possessed or influenced by an external entity, which drives them to abuse their children. However, this does not absolve the parent of their responsibility to recognize right from wrong and seek help. Children, especially in cases like these, may make excuses for their parents, often out of love, loyalty, or fear. And I've noticed this dynamic, is particularly common in the South Asian community, where cultural norms and family loyalty can sometimes lead to a reluctance to acknowledge or address abusive behavior. And so it's important to understand that while external forces may influence actions, individuals are still responsible for their choices, and seeking help is essential for healing and breaking these types of harmful cycles. Now, in the case of sihr, designed to create separation between a husband and wife, it's very similar in nature. Negative thoughts and feelings are instilled, causing one spouse to develop feelings of hatred, anger, or resentment towards the other. These feelings will often be irrational and magnified, perhaps malignant in some cases, leading to conflicts where one might begin to see their spouse as a threat, even though your spouse isn't a threat to you. Rather, they're a threat to the entity residing within you, channeling its hate and fear through you and making you believe those feelings are your own. And since these thoughts mimic your internal voice, it's easy to believe they're genuinely yours. And this is how this intrusive cycle becomes systematically embedded into your subconscious, hindering your progress whenever something positive starts working in your favor. The realization often hits even harder after a ruqya session, when they reflect on all the arguments they may have had driven by these intrusive thoughts and feelings. And accepting their role in these conflicts becomes a challenge for some people, as the weight of accountability clashes with the understanding that much of their behavior was influenced by external forces. This internal struggle can make making amends difficult for some people, as they may feel misunderstood, embarrassed, or even hesitant to confront the damage that they caused. Unfortunately, some people avoid acknowledging their affliction altogether because it feels like losing control and autonomy over their minds and choices. And I get it, it's a horrible realization to think that these were my feelings, my emotions, my anger and hate, only to wonder later if they were truly yours or if they were triggered responses. But then some emotions may feel justified because you remember the events very clearly. But what if they were manipulated? And what if your partner is also afflicted, with both entities working together to create conflict to convince you both the relationship isn't right? Now, I've had patients like this who divorced only later to undergo ruqya and discover an entity laughing through them, saying, I was going to leave anyway, I've done my job, it's too late. And as you can imagine, these revelations often lead to heartbreak, especially when it's too late. Their former partner has moved on and married someone else, and it's even more devastating when there are children involved. That's why I emphasize the importance of seeking guidance from the right people, those who can offer relevant and informed advice for your specific situation. Often, couples going back and forth with family members and friends who are often biased, or community leaders who don't address the likelihood of there being seher of separation as the root cause, can potentially destroy your marriage. And that's why it's important for us to learn and understand how the shayateen operate. It's not a natural human response when things are blown out of proportion and defy logic. And there's no rational reason for that. It's a deliberate form of manipulation intended to destabilize and control you. If we're both on the same page, following the same religion, and agreeing to disagree while acknowledging that different opinions can all be valid, then I don't see why things should be blown out of proportion unless we're not truly on the same page. And I get it, it's not always as straightforward as that. There may be family history and other baggage involved, but there are places where you can seek appropriate help for that. Now, in cases where the entity or influence has been present from a very early age, the missing link to your recovery is your emotional subconscious mind. You have to heal your inner child. And I think it's very important to address this, since your early experiences would have significantly shaped your subconscious, influencing behaviors and emotional responses throughout your life. So it's important to identify and process these early experiences that may be contributing to your current challenges. Alhamdulillah, this healing process has brought so much relief and transformation to many people who have used this method. And over time, as they began to understand the root causes of their struggles, they were able to identify and break free from the negative conditioning that had kept them trapped for many years. The recovery process became much easier, especially when this was combined with consistent ruqya, patience, and trust in Allah's plan. Many people have found strength and clarity to move forward. Now, in cases where sihr has affected more than one person in the family, it's far more effective when the family unites to fight this common enemy, as the enemy thrives on division and would rather keep you separated, making it harder to heal and break the connections that bind you to this harm. Now, I've seen how effective and how much more successful healing is in supportive families compared to those who dismiss or disregard the idea of sitting together with others they've not resolved their differences with. But then ask yourself, where is that enmity and those unresolved differences really coming from? Now, in the case of sihr, the exact moment when the contract of sihr will break is unknown. Only Allah knows best when that will happen. Understand, it's different when you find the element or item and you're able to cancel it. You're able to break that spell. But what if you don't find the item? Well, what we have to look at here is what is within our control. And that is our commitment to the process, which requires persistence, patience, and trust in Allah. Even if progress feels slow, remember, every step you take weakens the grip of the sihr and strengthens your resilience. Remember, your consistency in this fight is not only a testament to your strength, but also an act of worship that draws you closer to Allah's mercy and protection. And it's not just mind control or manipulation that the shayateen engage in. The impact extends further, deeply intertwining with your physical health. There is a significant connection between your gut health, your nervous system, and the shayateen's ability to disrupt your biological systems. And the shayateen exploit this connection, creating imbalances that manifest as unexplained physical symptoms. And this is how many individuals often find themselves trapped in endless cycles of inconclusive medical tests and treatments with no clear resolution or understanding of what's causing their symptoms. And this pattern isn't just a coincidence, it's part of a broader strategy of oppression and destabilization. By targeting the gut brain axis, the shayateen aim to weaken both the body and the mind. We already know the shayateen begin their influence by planting negative, self destructive thoughts in the subconscious mind to distort the way you perceive yourself and the world around you by reinforcing beliefs like, I am worthless, no one cares, or I will never get better, weakening your emotional resilience, and in turn creating a loop of emotional turmoil. And when this emotional instability is allowed to continue, it creates a fertile ground for them to deepen their control over your mind and body. And as your emotional state deteriorates, your physical health begins to mirror this imbalance, especially in the guts, where much of your emotional regulation takes place. And it's not like modern scientific research doesn't acknowledge this. In Western medicine, psychosomatic, and neurogastroenterology, the gut is sometimes referred to as the second brain because it plays such a crucial role in regulating emotional and physical health. What's also interesting and worth highlighting here is a point from Dr. Richard Anderson's book, Cleanse and Purify Thyself. Dr. Anderson is well respected in the field of alternative health, though I say alternative, which is ironic as natural health practices should be the norm while pharmaceuticals should be considered the alternative, but under Iblis's influence, everything is inverted. What is natural is deemed alternative, and what is alternative becomes conventional. And this inversion of reality is a reflection of the upside down world we live in, where we are conditioned to accept this distorted view from our early schooling. Now, what I find really interesting about Dr. Anderson's work is his focus on the physical and spiritual benefits of internal cleansing. And while he doesn't mention metaphysics directly, his gut cleansing approach actually aligns with Ruqya-related healing. Dr. Anderson explains how thoughts and feelings are powerful forces of energies and vibrations that fuel the subconscious, which in turn manifests patterns in our bodies and lives, and that our subconscious patterns control much of what goes on inside our bodies, even the expression of our DNA, as described in the emerging field of epigenetics, that the thoughts and feelings of yesterday have created our lives as they are today, and our thoughts today will impact us one way or another into the future. Another interesting point Dr. Anderson mentions is how emotions seep into the protein structure of cells, and that when the old emotion carrying cells die, the consciousness of those emotions are transferred to new cells or stored in proteins, and also how the liver holds emotions, especially anger, resentment, and fear, the very ones associated with cancer, which is also very interesting as this is one of the main target areas identified during Ruqya. So, since the liver is believed to store powerful emotions such as anger, resentment, and fear, when these emotions are not properly processed and regulated, they can impact the liver's function, and in turn, it will cause further digestive issues, particularly affecting the gut. And as Dr. Anderson goes on to explain that over time, as liver cells die, they are processed and released into the bile, which then moves into the bowel. Many of these dead cells and the toxins they contain accumulate in what is known as the mucoid plaque, a layer of mucus and waste matter lining the intestines. Now, many individuals who have undertaken intensive intestinal cleansing programs like this have actually reported significant benefits, saying that releasing the buildup from their bowels not only helped the body eliminate physical toxins, but also helped clearing a lot of the negative energy. And also seher that often lingers in the intestines, especially when it has been ingested, can also be expelled through this process, bringing both physical and spiritual relief. Now, in cases where jinn attachments are involved, this may not be a straightforward process as they interact with the body's organs, especially those already burdened with emotional or physical stress. So, for example, jinn could anchor themselves in areas of the liver where these negative emotions are stored, feeding on this energy and worsening your emotional imbalance. The gut may also be heavily affected as the gut and liver work closely together during the detoxification. So, any interference of disruption in these organs' natural processes can lead to increased anxiety as the body picks up on these internal stress signals. And when the liver struggles, it's going to create hormonal imbalances, increasing feelings of anger or irritability. And the shayateen are also very well acquainted with how the fear and stress response are closely linked. So if we look at how that works, fear is often a reaction to feeling out of control or under threat, which can sometimes be triggered by physical imbalances in the body. So now imagine if the body is overloaded with toxins or under spiritual attack, such as through seher or jinn influence, the stress response may become chronically activated. Now, in cases like that, a person may find themselves in a constant state of stress with their fear response switched on throughout the day, leading to the continuous release of cortisol, which is the body's primary stress hormone. And over time, this can significantly impact both your mental and physical well being. And the shayateen know how this works, so they would intensify this by repeatedly triggering or amplifying these emotions, further disrupting your internal balance. And when we incorporate this understanding with epigenetics, it takes on an entirely new dimension, especially with the current research in biology, where it highlights the importance of understanding how epigenetic states are initiated, maintained, and sometimes inherited, which is especially relevant in the study of learning, memory, emotions, and social behavior, and how experiences and the environment influence gene expression, shaping behavior, thinking, personality, and mental health. Now, given this scientific foundation, consider the potential effects jinn have on their human host when they connect to the human sensory system, where they embed their own experiences, influences, and energies from their unique environment and realm into the human's perception. Imagine the impact this has on the host's mind, not only psychologically, but also biologically. And when there are multiple gene attachments, each bringing its own set of experiences and influences, the complexity, as you can imagine, only intensifies. These additional layers of connection will no doubt amplify the disruption, creating an altered reality for the person afflicted, where perceptions, thoughts, and even physical responses may feel foreign or disjointed from the host's true self. For many people, the thoughts are intrusive at different levels depending on the type of sihr or possession, their circumstances, environment, family, culture, religion, age. All of these variables will play a significant role. And while we're discussing multiple gene attachments, it's interesting to note the change from multiple personality disorder, MPD, which was officially changed in 1994 with the publication of the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual of Mental Disorders, the DSM-4, and ICD-10, the UK version, published in 1992. Before this change took place, multiple personality disorder referred to a condition where a person seemed to have two or more distinct personalities, each with its own way of thinking, perceiving, and interacting with the world. This term was replaced with dissociative identity disorder, shifting the focus from literal multiple personalities to the idea of dissociation, a disconnection between thoughts, identity, consciousness, and memory. This change emphasized that the disorder was more about fragmented identity than truly separate entities, and emphasized trauma or stress as the underlying cause. Now, while this perspective may apply in cases of trauma or stress, multiple personality disorder is fundamentally different and unrelated to dissociative identity disorder. Yet, many practitioners seem to uncritically follow the DSM and ICD's direction, often adopting its changes without deeper scrutiny. The fact that it was once accepted that entirely separate entities existed within one individual aligns more closely with the concept of jinn entwining with their human host, and that often there are multiples, each with their own patterns of thinking and perceiving, influencing the human they inhabit, even though outwardly that could easily appear as a mental health disorder. And so it begs the question, why would they alter or remove it from their medical manuals? Now, having said that, even then, the term multiple personality disorder is contextually inappropriate, labeling it as a disorder. It could have been termed differently, like spiritual manipulation phenomenon or psychological disruption or anything else, instead of labeling it as a disorder and implying that there is an inherent disorder in the person. It should be acknowledged that the fragmentation is caused by external forces. Now let's take a deeper look into what happens biologically to an afflicted person and why the shayateen attack the gut. So by aggravating your gut health, the shayateen aim to disrupt the balance of neurotransmitters like serotonin produced in the gut, which are crucial for mood regulation. And they know that with a disrupted gut brain axis, you are more likely to feel emotionally unstable, reactive, and stuck in negative patterns of thinking. They also understand how the nervous system, in particular the autonomic nervous system, regulates your body's response to stress, knowing that when you're in a state of constant fear, anxiety, or emotional turmoil, your nervous system goes into a heightened fight or flight mode. And this overactivation of the sympathetic nervous system, the part responsible for stress responses, makes it harder for your body to relax and to heal. So, by using emotional manipulation, they provoke a constant state of stress and anxiety, which keeps your body in a state of hyperarousal. This not only depletes your energy, but also prevents your body from properly healing, both emotionally and physically. And the shayateen's ability to create this constant threat and emotional overload leads to fatigue, confusion, and even physical symptoms like insomnia or digestive distress. The shayateen also know that emotional suppression, where you push down feelings rather than processing them, can weaken the body's natural defense mechanisms. And by keeping you in a state of emotional numbness or repression, they prevent you from fully expressing or understanding your emotions. This emotional bottleneck can make it harder for you to heal, as unresolved emotional pain gets stored in the body and can manifest as physical illness. And by blocking the natural flow of emotions, the shayateen ensure that you are unable to fully engage with your healing process, which makes it harder for you to move forward in life as unresolved emotional wounds are left unaddressed, further impairing your mental, emotional, and physical health. And so the beauty of healing through ruqya is that it directly combats the influence of the shayateen. Especially when ruqya is practiced consistently, it cleanses the body and mind, breaking the emotional, psychological, and spiritual blockages caused by these entities. The effect of ruqya also has on the spiritual and emotional realms, helps to rebalance the body's systems, especially the guts brain axis, allowing for healing and restoring the person's natural state. And it's only when you understand the depth of Shaitan's attack from this perspective do many people truly begin to grasp the depth of the attack on the human mind and body and take the necessary proactive steps to defend themselves through ruqya, maintaining a healthy emotional state, caring for their physical health, and protecting themselves and their family from the harmful whispers and influences from Shaitan. So the next time you hear this in a lecture or reading the Quran where Allah says, indeed, Shaitan is an enemy to you, so take him as an enemy, you will realize it's not merely a metaphorical warning. It's a profound revelation of the deliberate and persistent nature of this spiritual warfare. It highlights the calculated enmity of Shaitan, stemming all the way back to his promise to destroy Adam's offspring. And we can witness this enmity manifesting in various ways through media manipulation, wars and atrocities, the sacrifice of human life, and the corrupt elite running the world with Satan at the top of the chain of command. His demand to be seen as more deserving of the vicegerency of this world than Adam fuels his actions. The fingerprints of Shaitan's influence are unmistakable for those who take the time to look closely and have the ability to connect the dots. When you examine the patterns, the subtle ways in which thoughts, behaviors, and emotions are manipulated, it becomes clear that his influence is woven through many aspects of life, from the psychological to the spiritual. The signs are present for those willing to recognize them. But this requires a deep understanding, a willingness to step beyond surface level perceptions, and the insight to see how everything is connected within the larger framework of his schemes. Now, earlier I mentioned my patient's family medical history, which revealed her mother showing signs of hypothyroidism, another condition often observed in Ruqya patients. So, as we conclude this episode, I want to highlight the significance of a mother's connection to her children in the context of sihr, and why the mother's name, along with those of her children, is frequently used in such rituals and how it can pass down generationally. In traditional sihr practices, the sahir, the sorcerer, frequently requests the mother's name and birth details as well as those of the children in question. This is something well known within the South Asian community and other parts of the world, where some people still seek help from these so-called spiritual practitioners when they suspect spiritual issues may be at play. These practitioners would commonly ask for the mother's details, such as her name and date of birth, along with the child's information, regardless of whether the child was a minor or an adult. So when the mother's name and child's name are provided, the spiritual practitioner would then send out tracker jinn to locate the individual. This could be for various purposes, such as finding someone who is missing, has run away from home, for example, or in cases involving illness where the jinn are used to gather information about the condition from the spiritual realm by locating the target. Often this process happens within seconds of silence, after which the practitioner relays the information. Now, it's important to clarify here that using jinn for such purposes is not permissible in Islam. Our reliance should always be on Allah and the prescribed Sunnah methods. Calling such individuals spiritual practitioners is therefore highly questionable, as their methods are rooted in forbidden practices. Now, let's say, for example, if someone were to seek help from a sahir to harm an individual, the sahir would often use a similar process by requesting the mother's details and the child's details, and there is a reason for that. Although they could also ask for materials like clothing that has been worn by the target, a photograph, a part of the hair, and so on. In Arabic, the word rahm, meaning the mother's womb, has a deep spiritual and emotional significance, as it shares the same root as Allah's name Ar-Rahman, meaning the most merciful. The womb isn't just a physical space, it symbolizes a deep spiritual and emotional connection. And because this divine connection between a mother and child is seen as a source of compassion, protection, and spiritual energy, sorcerers view this bond as an energetic gateway to the child's spirit. And the Sahir achieves this by invoking the mother's name and personal details to establish a spiritual link, which then serves as a gateway to amplify the effects of the spell. This process becomes significantly easier if the mother neglects her salah, her prayers, or fails to protect herself with the appropriate azkar. If the mother is lacking in her spiritual practice or protection, this potentially leaves her vulnerable, making it much easier for the sahir to exploit this spiritual weakness. And so by attacking the Rahim connection, the spell not only disrupts the natural harmony, the love and respect inherent in this bond, the goal is to inflict maximum damage. So for example, if sihr were cast to cause separation between the couple, but they remain married, when the couple have a child, since the sihr couldn't break the marriage from top down, it will work bottom up, using the child as the means to complete the contract by causing continuous dysregulation and unrest within their family home, ultimately leading the couple to divorce. The effects on the child, however, are deeply damaging, as you can imagine. Sihr creates internal conflicts, insecurity, and a sense of isolation, breaking the child's sense of stability, safety, and trust within the family. This can lead to an identity crisis and difficulties forming healthy relationships, and the same issues caused in the parents' relationship will often repeat in the child's future relationships unless ruqya is performed and the cycle is broken. So look at the lengths to which evil will go to inflict harm, even going so low as to target a child while still in the mother's womb. The fact that they are willing to subject you to harm from an early age, even as a child, is evident that they lack any sense of empathy. It's clear that they take pleasure in the suffering of others, particularly when their victims are defenseless or vulnerable. These demonic entities view others as mere objects to manipulate, control, or destroy. Their twisted ideology especially targets women and children, as they believe it is acceptable to abuse and exploit the most vulnerable. So when Allah warns us, indeed Shaitan is an enemy to you, so take him as an enemy, reflect deeply on this command, understand the relentless nature of Satan's enmity and what it entails. Do not underestimate his determination or methods. Focus on strengthening yourself both spiritually and physically, especially when confronting the shayateen. You need this balance, as your body will endure physical strain during ruqya sessions. And what we also learn from this is that in almost all cases, the child remains connected to the mother. This is why it becomes absolutely essential for both mother and child to seek ruqya together and work through this together to break down the sihr. Even if there is no initial reaction to ruqya, it doesn't mean nothing is there. So this is where the responsibility becomes collective. Each family member must take accountability and be disciplined in this fight against a common enemy. It's disheartening to see the wars and torture inflicted on our Muslim brothers and sisters around the world, yet we ignore the enemy within. Just because they appear inactive or silent doesn't mean they no longer exist. Now, I want to conclude by emphasizing the importance of the healing journey. So, like most new experiences, beginning your healing journey can feel unfamiliar and even uncomfortable. Unlearning old patterns and relearning healthier ways of thinking often makes positivity feel strange or out of place at first. And this is completely normal because you're stepping out of your comfort zone and challenging long held beliefs or habits. So, yes, change takes time and the process of transformation is gradual, and it's okay to feel uncertain, resistant, or even overwhelmed in the beginning. However, with consistency and patience, these positive practices and mindset shifts will start to feel more natural. Eventually, they will become a natural part of your life and way of thinking. Now, I hope this episode highlights just how intricate and layered these situations can be, and that you take a moment to consider what it must be like for the person who is afflicted, carrying this weight, living through it day after day. For them, these experiences are not just overwhelming, but also isolating as they struggle to articulate what they are going through. Often, the average person cannot fully comprehend the depth of this type of psychological and spiritual warfare. The unseen nature of these trials makes it even harder for others to empathize or offer meaningful support. It's easy to dismiss what we cannot see or understand, but this doesn't diminish the reality of their suffering. And I believe there is an urgent need for further research, and funding should be allocated to provide appropriate care and dedicated facilities for such patients, ensuring they receive focused treatment rather than being kept in endless cycles of inconclusive tests. The current system appears to be designed to keep patients trapped in a loop of diagnostic ambiguity that only benefits certain sectors, such as pharmaceutical companies, which thrive on maintaining a steady demand for medications. In this cycle, patients remain reliant on prescriptions to manage symptoms rather than addressing root causes. Similarly, hospitals and research institutions rely on the number of ongoing patients to justify funding for their programs, while consultants and doctors depend on the continuous flow of cases to secure their wages and salaries. Now, instead of training specialists and developing comprehensive treatment programs to support these individuals by addressing real issues, authorities would rather issue warnings about supposed pandemics or looming surges in antibiotic resistant infections, perpetuating a climate of fear and keeping people trapped in a state of anxiety and dependence. If you've enjoyed listening to my podcast, please like, comment, subscribe, and share this with others who you think it might benefit, especially if you know someone who is afflicted. I also run coaching classes to help people work through ruqyah-related traumas. So if you'd like to book a session, you can visit my website. I'll leave a link for that in my description. You can also follow me on my Instagram at Abu Amara Healing and also at Remap Your Mind for all the latest updates. May Allah protect you all, grant us all clarity, and give us the wisdom to recognize these struggles in others and offer the right support. Until next time, stay safe, stay strong, and never give up. Assalamu alaikum to all my brothers and sisters, wherever you are.